Hey YouTube, it's time to start on Christmas cookies for our holiday party. And if you're like me, this is the one, that elusive Christmas cookie that my mom used to make that I could never find the recipe for, and I've never seen it anywhere on a shelf in the store in my entire adult life. But I was given this book as literally a wedding present in 1991, and it happened to have my mom's, basically the duplicate of the recipe, because she, after I got to be an adult, she was like, I don't know where that recipe is. And this is the one cookie I remember having as a kid, one of 3 cookies I remember having as a kid at every single Christmas. And they just, like, you can't have Christmas without it, you know, that cookie. I mean, everyone's is different, but this is called iced peppernuts or Peppernuts. And this is a book called The Wonderful World of Desserts, an International Sampler. And I don't think I've ever cooked anything else out of it. And it's probably from, I just pulled it out. It's from 1991, of course, the year I was married. So someone got me this as like, hey, that new book that came out. And I happened to be flipping through it. And on page 91, I found the recipe. So I thought I would share it with you because I can't imagine Christmas without. These are like this warm spiced cookie with a soft, crackly icing on the outside. And if you found Peppernuts anywhere in the stores, I don't know if they even sell them, but if you ever see them, and if I've ever found them, they're always, they appear to be rolled in powdered sugar or some dusting of sugar. These have this soft icing on the, it's like a royal icing that kind of sets up, so it's got this light crackle. Oh my gosh, you guys. So I thought I would share these. I'm not going to share all of our Christmas cookies for the party just because, why? But these are unique, so I thought I would share them. And they're really odd. I mean, you start with them on the stove. You warm honey, and then you add an egg, and then you add some butter, and then you let that all cool. And then you add your dry ingredients. And this is where it gets interesting because the spices in this, the lineup here, the magic ingredients, aside from the icing, we have allspice, nutmeg, cardamom, never know how to say that, and aniseed, which I have ground up. If you don't have one of these, I have a tiny one because this is like 1/8 of a teaspoon, so it's tiny. Try to get them as ground up as you can because, you know, the finer they are, the more that flavor is going to distribute. And the other secret ingredient is black pepper. And when I saw that, I was like, that can't be right. But it is a 1/2 teaspoon. And I'm making a 1/2 batch of these because a full batch, and I will get a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. You saw it here first. I'll post the recipe in the description, so I won't put it on the screen or anything, but you can jump down there and copy the recipe if you want this because, mwah, these are so good. So I'm going to put the honey on the stove. Get it, you just warm it. You don't want it boiling. You warm it up, then you add the butter and the egg, and then we'll go from there. But I can't wait to share these with you. If you are looking for something to serve at Christmas that's maybe different or nostalgic or magical, you can try these. They're so good. But I'm going to get this going, and then we'll move on to how to put these together and assemble them and then dip them in that amazing icing. Let's go to the stove. So we're just adding all of this beautiful honey, and we are lucky enough to have beehives, but obviously you don't need to have your own honey, and we're just going to get that warming. While that honey is warming up, I have just gone ahead and sifted together the dry ingredients into a bowl to wait. I'll show you how warm this honey is. It's not boiling, but it's very warm, so you can see it's very stirrable, if that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the heat, and we're going to add this butter. This is unsalted butter. We're just going to stir that in the warm honey until it melts. And then we're just going to take it off the heat and let it cool down before we add the egg and the dry ingredients. And that has melted in. We're going to go ahead and just slide that off the burner and let it cool all the way down. And you just want it cool enough, I mean, basically bring it down to room temperature because you're going to be adding egg, and you for sure don't want to curdle an egg hitting hot honey. So we're going to let that sit for a bit, and we'll be back to finish the dough. All right, this has cooled off enough. It's just, the pot's just sort of barely warm. So we're gonna go ahead and add this 1 egg. And again, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I am making a 1/2 batch of this recipe because a full batch makes like 8 to 9 dozen cookies, and I do not need that many. So we're gonna stir that until it's blended all the way into that warm honey and butter, like that. And then we've got our flour and spice mix over here, and I'm just going to add this. You basically mix this dough right on the stove, which is pretty cool. I mean, you could pull the pan, you know, over to the counter, but we're just gonna stir it into a kind of a nice soft dough. And then it needs to sit and rest for 30 minutes. So while it's resting, we'll get the oven preheating to 350 degrees, and we'll start making the royal icing. Because if you can make the icing, but if you make it too early, you need to make sure you cover it, because as it sits, it wants to set up. You know, the outer layer of it will want to get crackly and dry out a little bit. So you want to either make it and cover it with some saran wrap really tightly to keep it fresh, or you can do like I do and just do it while the dough is resting. You could even mix it up while these are in the oven if you want, because they bake and then you dip them in warm. There's the rest of that. So you can see when you've got the flour incorporated into this dough, it is definitely not a firm dough, which is why we're going to let it rest for 30 minutes. Just out, you know, room temp. You're not putting it in the fridge. But you're going to want to be able to roll this into 1-inch balls, and look how soft it is. So you want to let that sit. I'm going to set a timer for 30 minutes. And we will move on to getting the oven warm and getting the icing prepped. So after 30 minutes, you'll see this has thickened up considerably. So you've got a dough that is something you can handle, and it is going to be sticky to handle with your hands. And I've never found a way to do that except by using one of these. So you're going to want 1-inch balls to go on the cookie sheet, and I just use one of these. It's just a little dough scoop that I don't know where I found it. If I found it on Amazon, I'll post a link down below. So we're going to take this and get 1-inch balls of that right on either a parchment lined or a silicone lined baking sheet. The way I do this with this little scoop is I just work right out of the pan and just fill it with the amount of dough that it'll hold, and just kind of carefully release that right onto the pan. And you can you want them to be smooth as they bake, and then we just continue on adding dough. I love these little scoops. I've got probably 3 different sizes of these, and put them about, I don't know, whatever that is, 2 inches, 1.5 inches apart on the tray. Kind of just get rid of the little lumps and bumps. And in the days before I had this little scoop, I would just do, I'd do it with my hands and just roll them, but you have to, you end up having to wash your hands off pretty often unless you flour them, which I don't do, because it feels like you're going to change the composition of the dough if your hands are floury. So I just kind of use the little scoop. And I don't know if you could grease the scoop. Like this is me just doing what I do at Christmas. So if somebody has a better idea, definitely chime right in. But this is just how I do it. And those might not be fully 1-inch balls, but you could measure them, I guess, with a measuring tape, but I'm not that picky. These just turn out really good just the way I'm doing it. And you can see all the little spices in there. It's really amazing, the flavor of these. It's so, I don't even know how to describe it. I guess like if you like chai, maybe, because cardamom and anise, like this is the only thing, I think the only food that I eat where I love the anise in it. I am not a fan of anise. So if you are not a fan of anise, try these. But if you love chai, try these, because I don't know why, but it just works in these. And there's quite a bit of anise and cardamom in the icing. That's the only spices that are going to be in the icing we're going to make for these. And if you want to get your finger a little bit wet, because I really want these to be not too lumpy, I guess, if that makes sense, because you're going to put kind of almost a soft, almost pourable icing will be on these. And the smoother they are, just the nicer they're going to look with that icing. So if you can kind of just do this a little bit with just a little bit of wet on your finger, just to kind of tuck in some of those little bumps and jagged bits. And then those are ready to go in the oven for 11 to 15 minutes. You just want to watch them until they're just a little bit golden around the bottoms. And then we will take them out and basically let them cool down a little bit, but while they're still warm, we will be putting the icing on them. So these go on the middle rack in a 350-degree oven for 11 to 15 minutes. After exactly 11 minutes, those look just the way I want. They're just slightly starting to turn golden around the edges. So we're going to pull those out and just get them to a rack to cool a little bit while we make some icing. While those are cooling a little bit, we're going to go ahead and just separate 4 eggs into whites and yolks. And I'm going to set aside the yolks to use with another cookie that I make that is my #1 Christmas cookie that my mom always made, and it requires, coincidentally, 4 egg yolks. So don't waste the yolks. And, you know, reverse that, and if you have anything that needs yolks during the Christmas season, save the whites, and you can use them in, if you make macaroons, like coconut macaroons for Christmas dipped in chocolate. So I try to save any of this that can be used for something else. So for the icing, we have ground up aniseed and some cardamom, and this is just sifted powdered sugar. I'm just going to combine those two, and for this, I mean, you could use a little whisk. I don't know why, just out of long habit, I use a fork to make this icing. Blend that into the sugar, and I hoarded, this is our own honey that we get off of our backyard here. I don't sell it anymore, but I just saved the last of it just for this Christmas. This is the last 2 tablespoons of this glorious honey and the 4 egg whites, and we're just going to whip that together. So egg whites and honey, we're just blending them together, and then we'll just start adding some of the powdered sugar to this mix. And again, the recipe for this will be down below. So you're just incorporating that sugar into the honey and egg whites. If you have an issue with egg whites going into your icing, you could substitute meringue powder and water, and this would turn out the same way. So there's an easy substitution there, which I will include in the recipe below in the description. So if you don't want to use just egg whites in an icing for your cookies, you don't have to, and you will still be able to make a wonderful iced Peppernuts. So we're going to just keep adding powdered sugar and kind of scraping the bowl, and you can see as you add it, it becomes more opaque. We'll add the last of the sugar. And I don't know why I use a fork for this, but I just do. It's just the way my mom did, I guess, or the way I remember seeing it done. And this is just the way I've done it every year of my life since 1991, every single Christmas. Okay, you can see, so that is like, still got some lumps, but it'll be all right. The sugar is sifted, so I'm not too worried about it. You can see this is a nice sort of pourable, fairly thin, but also opaque white icing. As soon as the cookies cool, we'll get them iced. And if you're making the icing ahead, make sure you cover it with a nice piece of saran wrap or something so it doesn't start to dry out and get crackly before you need it. So these cookies have been out of the oven. They're just still warm. They're not hot at all, but they aren't cold yet. And you can see they just turned a nice, gorgeous golden on the bottom. So I still have the royal icing here that's been sitting covered. And if you could see how small my space is, and don't look over there because there's dishes. I'm also making cheese today. I'm such a mess. I won't even show you. So what I do is put whatever size bowl you've got. I can fit about 4 of these in here. And I just kind of toss them around. Let me see if I can hold the camera and do this at the same time. Toss them around in the icing so they're nice and coated. And this icing today got thick enough where it may not need a second coat, which would be magical. If it's thinner icing, okay, so you can thicken this with powdered sugar as you see fit. But there you can see how glossy and beautiful that is. And I just kind of let it drain a little bit off the bottom. And then we're going to move right over here. And I just set a rack on top of, you can put parchment or a silicone mat on a cookie sheet and just let them sit there to kind of set up. And this icing will set into sort of a nice, softly, but definitely a crackle. It's soft when you bite into it. It's the most amazing thing. It's soft when you bite into it, but the surface of it will be kind of shiny and smooth and firm. And guess what? You can not only freeze the dough for these, look at the spices in there. You can not only freeze the dough for these, but you can also freeze these once they're set up and, you know, completely cooled and set up. You can freeze these once they're finished, just like this. So I make these at Christmas, and oh no, if I make too many, I will put them in the freezer. And since they are my favorite cookie, like they're one of my favorite cookies ever, they just are one of my favorite things in the world with these spices. So I'll put them in the freezer, maybe a few more in there, and then just put them in a Ziploc bag in the freezer, and you can pull one out now and then and just have a little sweet treat whenever you want, you know, defrosted of course. And make sure you get the bottoms. I can't flip one over to show you, but make sure the bottoms are iced enough too, because I feel like that seals in the freshness. These cookies stay soft and chewy on the inside once this icing sets up. And I think it's probably because they're, you know, they're sealed in a little coat of icing. So it's like a sealed up, wonderful spicy cookie covered in wonderful spicy icing. It's not too spicy. But if you're going to serve these at a party, just say they're like a spice cookie, because I see people tend to shy away when you say there's black pepper in them. They're like, nah, what else do you have? So maybe lean away from the admitting until they try one and they say, oh my gosh, what's in here? And then you can spring that on them and say, black pepper, man, that's the secret ingredient. It's not a lot. They don't taste like a I do make a black pepper chocolate cookie that's actually really good. But these don't taste like a black pepper cookie. They just taste like spicy, wonderful magicness. So if you haven't tried these ever in your life, you definitely should start right now. And if you've had them before, but you couldn't find the recipe for the ones like this with this wonderful icing, here you go. And if you're just looking for something new to try for Christmas, to serve to your friends and family, you might try these. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.